Sermon. Once again, we're continuing in Ecclesiastes, getting a chance to talk a little bit about Hevel, getting to kind of deal in what Ecclesiastes deals with, how it applies to our lives. I've been enjoying this. I know you've talked about enjoying this as well. I liked how you did preface it. You let everybody know that we are that you went so short and brief on your first one that you were gonna make sure that we were dug in for a long one for this one. Wasn't quite as long as I think as you led people to believe,
right.
but
not by your standards.
Not by my standards. No, I'm a little long-winded, as we know. But tell me a little bit about this one for you. You had a different tone to this one. I think this one got a lot more real. It got a lot more applicable, at least for the way that you were talking about. Tell me a little bit about it as you were preparing the sermon.
Yeah, we're talking about how to experience lasting contentment in a fleeting life. And the reality is, the first week, we spend a lot of our time frustrated because of the world that we live in. And we wake up every day and it's like a shock that the world is going to have some absurd things happen, that we're going to spend a lot of time working on stuff that on the surface seems pointless, and that time flies, and we're just you can't stop it. Life goes very quickly, and so the first week it was more of an accepting that certain things are outside of our control. You can't control the outcome, and really that point is somewhat foundational to get to where we were yesterday, because if you're constantly frustrated because you can't force the outcome that you want, then you're never going to really be able to enjoy life. And that's where we were yesterday, was to say that, God gives us certain things, and we just noted three of them, and they were kind of parallel to the 3 points in week one. And so we talked about, God, we have the gift of wisdom, we have the gift of work, and we have the gift of time. And these things are to be enjoyed, to be experienced in the moment, rather than just thinking that, one day I'm going to get to a place where I can enjoy life or experience life as it's meant to be experienced. But even right now, we should recognize that God has given us these gifts, and let's enjoy them, let's experience them as they are. Now, you're not going to be able to do that if you're still white-knuckling the outcomes of life, as though you're so frustrated that some absurd, pointless, fleeting things have happened. You're never going to be able to let go and just enjoy these gifts of God. So that's where we were yesterday.
Yeah, that was. It's interesting. I brought it up just a minute ago that I enjoyed your second and third points more than your first. Not that I didn't like the first one, but I enjoyed the last two. I think because of how they play into my life. I think as when we sit in the congregation, we listen, the things that really speak to us are the things that fit into our life a little bit more applicable, that really impact us a lot more. And for me, looking at the last two, looking at the gift of work and the gift of time, I think the most interesting thing about those is that we don't always think of those as gifts, do we?
Right.
We think about the gift of work, and what do we say we do that? When we think of work, I think we think of jobs. The way that we're tuned, the way that we, I get up and I go, I do this and this and this in the morning, then I go to my job. I go to my work, and I'm there, and I do that, and then I come home. And I think for some of us, it can be just this endless cycle marching on towards retirement, marching on towards an extended vacation that we're looking for. And that's not really where we were going with this one, was it? That sometimes we get so focused on the future that we just completely skip over the journey. That's what I wrote down in my notes. For me, it's something that I try to tell myself, because I get way ahead of myself. Enjoy the journey.
Sure.
And it's part of what you're talking about, is that each day is a blessing, and that there are blessings within the days, that there are things to enjoy within the day. Sometimes there's absurdity, but if we don't enjoy the journey, then what are we really doing? That's kind of what the book of Ecclesiastes is saying, isn't it?
Right, yeah. And, to say that work is a gift means that, what we do on a given day actually matters. It's not going to just all be wiped out, in eternity, that it actually makes a difference in the life of someone else, and that difference is going to matter in the long run. And, we mentioned this, I think, our last sermon notes, that probably 80 to 90% of our day just runs just as you would expect. You know, you do X, you do Y, you get Z. And for me, that's a gift of God to know that, okay, when I go to work and I put certain things into practice, that I can actually make progress, I can actually help people, and I can actually do meaningful work. But yeah, also, you know, just the whole time thing, that we go through different seasons in life, and quite often we always want our favorite season to come around, and we think, well, I'll just wait to enjoy life until that season comes around. But that, you know, that season may not come around for a while or ever, who knows, but every season of life can be experienced and can be enjoyed in some sense. And I think that if you just take that mindset and you look for the good, you know, he talks about finding enjoyment. So there's this initiative on our part to seek enjoyment, to find enjoyment, to see the good in the way things are. And this, I don't think this is overly optimistic. I think this is a realism, just to note that it's a mixed bag. That even on bad days, even where there's a little bit more absurdity than most, there's still stuff to learn from that. There's still stuff to grow in that. And, you know, the next day, the next morning is going to come. And so you have that fresh start there.
Yeah. Well, and I think within that too, it's important to to understand that when we talk about work, that we get kind of shifted towards this thought of work as job. Work doesn't necessarily mean job, does it? You know, I mean, that's the deal. Is work means what you've been given to do,
right?
And that falls into, you know, I think to Sunday school lessons from yesterday. You know, we were really. I really looked at it with the college group in terms of talking about the gifts that we're given. You know, Paul was writing to Timothy and was talking about not neglecting the gifts that he's been given. That doesn't always involve our work. No, maybe it does. For you, it certainly involves your work. But for some of us, I mean, that we are, not some, all of us, we are gifted in ways that doesn't necessarily involve the ways that we make a living, the ways that we have a paycheck.
Right.
I think it's important to recognize that we have gifts and we have work to do that goes beyond those things, whether it be raising children, whether it be just the way that we interact in the community outside of our jobs, that there's more to work, there's more to enjoying work than just simply going to your job and putting on a smile and being happy.
Yeah, it goes beyond the 8 to 5 time clock, and to know that during those 8 to 5 hours, God can use you in whatever circumstances you find yourself in to make a difference in the lives of others. Maybe you're the one that softens the heart of the boss by your kindness, by investing in his or her life. Maybe you're the person that can go into that office place, and I love a phrase that John Randalls was fond of using. He'd say, change the room. You know, there's two kinds of people. There are those who walk into a room and they just immediately conform to the attitude, to the spirit of that room. And if it's negative, you know, you walk into a lounge and everybody's being negative, you just kind of conform into that. Or you can be the kind of person who goes in and maybe there is a negative spirit in that lounge, but you walk in and because of your strong, ethic and attitude, you change the atmosphere by speaking positively. You know, we've got the gift of either speaking life or death. And when we speak death, we tear people down, we lower people's attitudes and just kind of get in the muck. But we also have the opportunity to speak life and encourage people and build people up. And so I love John Randall's message to be a room changer, to be the kind of person who goes in and changes everything.
Yeah, well, and that's okay. One of my favorite moments that you did yesterday is you said if we were to ask how many of you got in your car, turned your key, and your car started, it would be almost everybody in the room. Maybe there'd be one person. Yeah. And if there was one person who raised their hand and said, "Well, I turned my key and the wheel fell off," that we'd make a big deal about that. But yet, what were there? I don't know, 350 people in the room yesterday, and all of them basically got in the car, turned, and it started. And yet we tend to make such a big deal of, and you called it the glitch days.
Yeah.
That one thing. And so we talk about how often we get focused on that one thing, and that one thing that goes bad, and then all of a sudden, and it just kind of builds and builds and builds.
Yeah.
And when you talk about speaking life, that's such a cool thing, because it's what Ecclesiastes is saying, is not everything's always going to add up.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to get shocked and surprised that you said that the first day, the first sermon, and that has really resonated in my heart, is don't be shocked or surprised.
Right.
That's the way that it goes.
Yeah.
And so we deal with it. We move on to the next thing.
Right.
That we don't need to be the people, and you were just talking about this, and this was awesome, is we don't need to be the people that are constantly focusing on the negative, that
Right.
are constantly bringing the mood down. Not that we always have to be chipper and happy.
Right.
We do need to speak truth, but we need to be speaking truth in love.
Yeah.
And I think we move into something there, is that we need to speak truth in love, but
Yeah.
that also doesn't always mean being the guy that is hounding on people, that is hounding on
Right.
situations, that is hounding on absolutely everything, and just creating that negative vibe.
Right. Yeah, in a sense, we all get frustrated with news reporters when they cover a story and they put like a negative spin on something that may either be neutral or we think could be positive, and we call it the media bias. But in a sense, we're all news reporters in our own lives, and if our car doesn't start, for example, that's going to get the weight of the news coverage that day. A million other things may go right, but what people are going to hear about is the fact that this one thing went wrong. And so sometimes we're our own worst enemy in that we interpret our days negatively because of a bad 5 minutes or a bad moment in time, rather than looking at the day as a whole and realizing, I woke up this morning, I had clothes to wear, I had shelter, I had food, I had a family who loves me, went to a job that's helping me provide for my family. Yeah, there's some people that may or may not be difficult to work with there, but I'm able to get my work done. I'm able to make a difference in the lives of people and come home and take my kids to soccer and all of these things. But if one thing goes wrong, then that's what gets the coverage. And so I think this is why, the Bible always encourages us to rejoice always. Again, I say rejoice. Paul wrote that from prison. What does a guy who's in prison say to a church on the verge of persecution? He says, rejoice always. Again, I say rejoice. He found that silver lining. He saw the good, even in other preachers in that day bashing him. He says, who cares? He says, as long as they're preaching the gospel. And certainly we should have that same mindset, that we're thankful, that we can look at the world not with rose-colored glasses, but as it really is, that Jesus has died for our sins on the cross. God raised him from the dead. He's reigning as Lord, that he's going to bring full redemption, restoration to everything. And that reality ought to weigh on us every single day that we go through. So
yeah, well, in Philippians 4:8, and I always get the verse wrong. I know the scripture, but I always quote it wrong. So we're just going to paraphrase it. But that's what Paul says. He says, "Whatever is right, whatever is good, whatever is true, whatever is noble and praiseworthy, think on these things." Think on these. Like it means that it's supposed to be on the forefront of our minds. Right. I think because it's so easy to not. Right? I think because, like you said, it's a news reporter thing. That if I go through my day and everything goes exactly as it always does, exactly as it's planned, I get up and say, hey, this morning my toothbrush was sitting right in the same cup holder that I left it in last night. Hey, perfect. That's not newsworthy. But if I get up and my dog had jumped up on the counter, chewed up my toothbrush, chewed up my toothpaste, and so I had to stop by H-E-B on the way and then that becomes newsworthy. But it doesn't mean that doesn't happen, but it does mean that we're supposed to think on the good things. We're supposed to think. We're not supposed to just skim over them.
Emphasize it, yeah. Celebrate the good. Celebrate those things that you can be thankful for, and realize that and don't put all the news coverage on the hevel of your day, on the absurd, the pointless, or the fleeting parts of your day. Let the news coverage reflect the goodness of God in your day and give him glory, because as Christians we should be the most joyful people on earth. I mean, our hearts should be filled with joy, and not to say that we don't struggle with a number of different challenges that we go through in a given day, but the fruit of the Spirit is, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, self-control, and gentleness and faithfulness, and all these things. And this is what it means to walk in the Spirit and to be of God and in the Spirit. So, I think all of that's important in living the Christian life, and should be seen as a gift from God.
Yeah, well, and it does bring up the interesting topic of joy, though, is that we have to make sure that we define joy correctly, don't we? Joy is not happiness.
Right.
Joy is not, hey, everything's always going to go right. And my systematic theology professor right now, I was studying the other day, and I was watching a video that he put up, and it was really good because he made sure to make the point. And I think we talk about this a lot, but I don't think we can make enough that Christianity is not some thing where you give your life to Christ, you follow Christ, and all of a sudden it becomes a Hollywood set where the lighting is perfect, where you just move from scene to scene. Yeah, maybe there's a few scenes that are a little rough and rocky, but you just move from... You still do life. And so it doesn't mean that joy is not happiness in the sense that nothing bad ever happens, that you don't get sick or that you don't get laid off or that you don't have tough times. But it is... we have our joy rooted in the faithfulness that God, even in those times, will sustain us.
Right.
That He will provide for us, that He will watch over us, that He will sustain our hearts and our minds in those times.
Right.
I think that's one of the things that is a key distinction to make, is that joy and happiness are not the same. That it doesn't mean that I'm going to walk around always being jolly. Now, I mean, some people are going to be more jolly than others at times. I think of my own little office with me and Matt.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and bash him since he's not here today.
Absolutely.
And we'd do it if he was sitting here. But I mean, that's the deal, is we're very different personalities. Now, doesn't mean that he's not joyful. He's a joyful guy. I think especially with his past and everything, he's joyful about his circumstances. He's joyful about his hope in Christ. I don't know if I've ever met someone who's more joyful about that, but just outwardly. I'm the fast-talking, bounce off the walls, stare at shiny objects type of guy, and yet we both share in joy. I think that's something that I don't know if we always do that real well within the church. I think sometimes we lean more towards happiness than we do towards joy.
Yeah, and I think we put kind of a facade over it, and we try to act happy rather than being joyful. And, and that's kind of what this series, the word contentment could go a number of different directions, but it's really that peace, that anchor of peace and hope and faith and love that we realize when we truly find that contentment. And again, we're kind of adding one piece after another to this secret called contentment. And week one was, accepting that the hevel of life, accepting that certain things are outside of our control, the outcomes, and this week enjoying those gifts of God that we are given each and every day, celebrating them, rejoicing in them, giving thanks to God for them, and so we're adding one piece each week, and it'll be exciting to get the whole picture together.
Oh yeah. Well, and there's something I wanted to make sure that we hit here is you were talking about the gift of wisdom, and that part of living in wisdom means living in harmony with the design. Speak a little bit more to that. You expounded on it a little bit, but I wanted to hear more, because I know the way that you think. I know that there was a lot going on in your mind. I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, we live in a culture where we basically think that we decide what's moral based upon our feelings. And so, we've kind of severed, the natural world from the moral law. Okay, so we don't get any indications in our culture today that, for example, the physical world has a purpose or a telos. It doesn't, it's not going in a certain direction. There's no plan. There's no intention. And so if you believe that, if you adopt that, then you just live however you want to. And there's no moral law to go by other than human reason, just whatever seems right to us. And I think that this is part of the fallout from Darwinism and atheistic evolution, that Everything's just, there's no design, there's no purpose, there's no meaning. It's just all random chance. And so, it's more of an accidental type thing that we are who we are and that we're doing what we're doing. The Bible speaks, I think, very clearly against that, to say that God has a purpose for the world and for us as human beings. And I think, one of the things we looked at yesterday was just, whether you're an atheist or whether you're a Christian, the world, the physical world actually gives strong indicators of that. It's what we call fine-tuning. Whether you're an atheist or not, they at least believe that there's the illusion of fine-tuning. You have to admit that, because if things were off just by a certain percentage point, then everything would be different. But that goes all the way to the human body as well, that, eyes are for seeing, ears are for hearing, and so forth. And this plays a significant role in, human sexuality, because today we live in a society that says, really anything goes sexually. It's whatever I feel, whatever I desire, however I'm oriented, that must be right. And say no, if you look at the male body and the female body, they are compatible. Physiologically, genetically, biologically, they are counterparts of one another. And I believe that means something. I believe that loving a person's body itself would mean realizing that God created it for a purpose. And that purpose, that identity is not found just in my wants, my desires, but actually in who God created me to be. And, and this issue, of course, is present just about everywhere. Even right now as we're speaking, the Temple Public Library is making a decision about a display they had last June. I think it was the LGBT display where they said, "Celebrate Pride Month with us." And so now they've had some pushback and feedback on that. So they're making a decision today as to what they're going to do with that. But, the reality is, if you say celebrate Pride Month, that is a moral claim. It's not saying that you're agnostic. It's not saying I don't really know. It's making a moral statement. And my question would be, what grounds does one have to say that, for example, homosexual behavior is morally good? What grounds do you base that on? Can't be orientation, because logically that would lead into some very dangerous places if we just said that, okay, I'm oriented and I desire a certain thing, and so therefore that makes it right. But of course we desire all kinds of things that are not actually morally good. So that's, at a minimum, that's not grounds for saying that's morally acceptable. And I believe that you can look at just the physical world itself and the body, human body, and get indicators of the purpose, the meaning, and that indicates moral nature. I wanted to read again a quote I read from Nancy Pearcey. She wrote a book that I'm actually reading right now called Love Thy Body, just fascinating book. But she writes, morality is the guidebook to fulfilling God's original purpose for humanity, the instruction manual for becoming the kind of person God intends us to be, the roadmap for reaching the human telos, or purpose. This is sometimes called natural law ethics because it tells us how to fulfill our true nature, how to become fully human. And so this would mean the way our bodies function provides rational grounds for moral decisions. And those opposed to this would say, no, our bodies don't provide any grounds. They don't give any purpose, and they're not indicators of what's good and right. And I would just fundamentally disagree with that and ask for them to provide their own moral grounds for what they believe.
Yeah, it does. It comes down to what is the basis for morality? Are we our own basis? And I don't think we can be. You kind of like what she was saying. I can draw my own roadmap to Dallas if I want. I can turn where I want. I can drive the direction that I want, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to get there. That there is still a path that here to there is always defined. That there is a way to get there. I can take a couple of different roads, but I can't define my own based on how I want it. I don't want it to take me 2 hours to get to Dallas. I want it to take me 15 minutes. My own desires don't change that whatsoever.
Right.
And I think that's the deal, is that there has to be a basis for our morality. We can't just say, kind of with trying to tie it, make sure that it stays tied in with wisdom and with living in harmony with what God has created, that there is a path that just because I want it doesn't mean that it's right. I can want a lot of things. I want $1 million. That doesn't mean that because I want $1 million, that any way that I can achieve $1 million is right.
Right.
I can go rob a bank. I want $1 million. Doesn't mean I may not kill anybody. I may not harm anyone. They may be insured, so therefore I don't hurt anybody. The bank's going to get the money back. Nobody's really going to lose any of their money. I'm really stealing from the government, I guess. I'll go that direction. I wish Matt were here for that one. But if I'm the basis for my morality, then I can do whatever I want, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, people today are identifying themselves foundationally based upon their sexual preferences. Okay? And so, I don't go around calling myself a carnivore, okay? Because I don't believe that I am. I love to eat meat and so forth, but I don't go around identifying myself in that way because that's not essentially, fundamentally, who I am. And likewise, I don't go around introducing myself as a heterosexual. Okay, I am, but that's not essentially, fundamentally who I am. That's not what's most fundamental about my identity. And so it's interesting because I believe that we are who God says that we are, and He's given indicators about that with just our physical body, that we as believers affirm the body. We're not Gnostics. We don't say that all physical matter is evil. And in that day, that they believed that it would have been an improvement in the days of Scripture to become a spirit and leave this prison of the body. That's kind of how they thought back then. I think that's greatly influenced us today in a sense, and we tend to think that way. But Christianity was radically affirming of the fact that, God created the physical world. He created human beings with physical bodies in His image. Jesus, in the incarnation, took on flesh and dwelt among us in that way, was crucified in that flesh, but rose again 3 days later in a physical, resurrected body. All of this is an affirmation of God's good creation, His affirmation of the physical world that we live in. And to me, this opposing view is that no, that really doesn't matter, and I reject that, and I say I don't know any good grounds for morality to say that, it's just whatever I choose, whatever I desire, however I'm oriented, doesn't make good sense to me, logically, so.
Well, I'm gonna have to restrain myself here just because the theology of creation is what I've been studying in class. So I have to restrain myself so that way we don't just start spouting off class notes. But that is time. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on Sermon Notes this week. We'll be back here next Monday at 10:30 a.m. to discuss Brother Jared's next sermon. We hope you can join us on Sunday morning at 10:30 right here at Taylors Valley Baptist Church. Going through the book of Ecclesiastes, enjoying it, and I hope you will join us back here on Monday morning. Thank you guys so much.